Hi, thank you for streaming one of our latest messages here at Mountain Lake Church. We hope you enjoyed the message. Please come back again very, very soon. We know that life change stories happen. They happen every day. And at Mountain Lake Church, we want to hear about your life change story. If you'd like to share your story, please visit us at mountainlake.tv and click on the story button. You can also find service locations as well as times. And if you can't come to see us in person, please know that we stream our services every Sunday at 9, 10:30, and noon. We look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Well, I'll tell you another place I felt God's presence was at the Thanksgiving table this past week, because I got to cook the bird this year. And if you're like me, you took a low-quality smartphone camera picture of some high-quality Southern cooking. You know what I'm saying? I brought a picture along. Check out the turkey that old Nathan cooked on my Kamado Joe. That's what the Big Green Egg wishes it could be. The red version, that's about 8 hours. Oh, there's some haters out there. Respect. The proof's in the pudding, well, the turkey in this case. But there's a story behind this iPhone picture, because if we're honest, there's the pictures that kind of show the life we want, and then there's the story behind the picture that's the life we actually have. And the story behind this bird in particular, I walked away from my grill for a little bit to prep the bird and finish the rub, and it got up to 800 degrees. And I walk outside to go fix this, the heat problem. And as I open it up, a gust of heat goes across my face. And here's the story behind that. Got a little bit of a haircut. That is not sawdust. That is burnt hair, burnt eyebrows. We all like to project our highlight reel to social media. We rarely have the story behind the story, but in full disclosure, Nathan had a little trim that day, and I now know what not to do. Hey, but isn't that kind of the case with everyday life? We've got the life we want versus the life that we've got. The story we want to show versus the story that we are living day in and day out. And what I'm here today to remind you of is that your story matters. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's not just the highlight reel that we like to celebrate, but the stuff that happens behind the scenes all come together to help make us who we are. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And as we're a church that's dedicated to life change stories, it means that we've got to be open and honest about the chapters that we would like to rip out of our life story. The dark chapters, the frustrating chapters, the moments of betrayal, the moments of our nightmares becoming our worst reality. We have to own it all, because God's not been taken by surprise, and God is in the business of using even the difficult moments of our life to not only make us depend on Him more, but to show a lost and broken and hurting world what hope looks like in the middle of the storms. And as we've been going through this series the past few weeks about managing our time, our resources, our influence, today I want to have a conversation about managing our relationships, managing our friendships, the people that God has placed into our lives, not just managing our reputation, which our selfish society seems to be a lot more concerned with what people think about us than concerned with people themselves. So today's management talk is about managing our story, managing our relationships, and putting that before our reputation. It's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus always surrounded himself with people that took his reputation from really nothing special, the son of a carpenter, to nothing good, the friend of sinners. Matter of fact, we're going to be camping out in the book of Matthew. And Matthew is a very unique voice as compared to the other three gospel accounts, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew was a tax collector that Jesus called out of that life into becoming one of his disciples, one of the ragtag, dirty dozen. The guys that Jesus recruited and mentored and deployed to do ministry and start the very first Christian church were a rough group that gave Jesus a bad reputation. But Jesus wasn't worried about his reputation with people. He was busy having relationships with people, and Matthew was one of those. So the entire voice, the entire essence, the entire lens that we're looking through as we read these verses and these stories in the book of Matthew is the voice of a tax collector who'd been rejected by his society. You see, tax collectors of the day, he was a Jewish man that was employed by the Roman Empire because he bid the lowest rate that he would charge the Roman Empire to perform his services, which is taxing his people. So the way the tax collectors would make up for their loss by giving a really low service fee to the Roman Empire was by asking more than what was necessary out of their countrymen, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their friends, the Jewish people. They would tax them higher, give what belonged to the Roman Empire to Rome, and keep the rest for themselves. It was a really filthy, dirty accounting practice. Probably see something like that happening nowadays as well. But they were looked at as kind of the scum of the earth. They were looked at as cheaters, as criminals. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with old Matthew if they wanted to have anything to do with the church, the synagogue, the temple. So, needless to say, a guy like Matthew would attract people from the same walks of life. Matthew's best friends were drunks and criminals and prostitutes. And Jesus comes up to Matthew, knowing the stigma around Matthew, and says, "Follow me." Matter of fact, open up your Bible to Matthew chapter 9. I'm going to read you the story of Matthew's calling and what took place there in these few minutes, and how Jesus' relationship with Matthew caused his reputation in the church community to take a hit. In verse 9 says, "As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. He said to him, 'Follow me.' And he rose and followed him." Like right there is something to note, that Matthew would see this man, Jesus, who's been performing miracles and teaching people the Bible, that he would come after a guy like Matthew and say, "Follow me." Matthew dropped everything he had and said, "I'm going to follow this Jesus guy." And the first thing that Matthew does, this is just who Matthew is. He throws a party to celebrate. And I love what happens here. "As Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?' But when he heard it, he said, 'Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners.'" Now there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to really dive in to understand some of the social taboos that Jesus was breaking by hanging out with these. Another translation says disreputable sinners. Just another example of how Jesus kind of throws caution to the wind, doesn't worry what people think about them, makes himself busy with people. And here Jesus is hanging out with people that have been written off, rejected, judged, burned, marginalized by the church and the pastors of that day. Not unlike some scenarios that we would find right here in the good old Bible Belt. But there's something that I don't want us to miss, because it's really easy to put on the church face, to try to maintain a good Christian Sunday school reputation, and miss out on relationships. And what I want you to understand is that we're not supposed to settle for an artificial reputation when we were meant for an authentic relationship with God and with people. An authentic relationship where we can just be ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The presence of Jesus is supposed to be a safe place. He demonstrates this in his body language without even saying a word to the sinners, to the criminals, to the drunks, to the prostitutes. It says Jesus reclined with them. His posture, his body language spoke volumes. This is Jesus having a meal with some seedy characters, disreputable sinners. You see, there's something about being able to recline that just shows you're at ease, that you identify with the people in the room. Jesus wasn't dominating the conversation. Jesus wasn't telling them what they got to do to get in the kingdom of heaven at this moment. He was just present. He just reclined in the presence of sinners. He identified as a human. You see, there's tremendous depth here in this moment, because 30 years before, Jesus says in the book of Philippians chapter 2 that he deprived himself of majesty from the throne of heaven and came down to earth, which is the time of year we celebrate the journey of Jesus from heaven to earth, where he became like one of us and lived 30 years with no fanfare, with no spotlight, with no Twitter shout outs, as a carpenter, basically a nobody. 3 decades before he turned water into wine, all of a sudden was a big character there in the Bible days. And I'm sure some of the people around the table are like, Jesus, want to do some of that little magic trick, turn some water into wine here? And Jesus probably like, these knuckleheads, these disreputable sinners, these are my people. I love them anyway. See, Jesus came to earth 100% God, but 100% man. And he faced every struggle, every temptation we have, every anxiety, every fear, every ailment. He faced it so that he could identify with the human condition. And for too long, I think our ears as Christians have been closed to the cries of a lost and broken world. You notice Jesus resorted to medical terms. He said it's not the healthy that need a healer, it's the sick. That word there, sick, means a lot more than just having a cold and needing to take some Dayquil. The Aramaic Greek that he would have been speaking there, the word sick actually had more to do with being sore and facing just absolute misery. What you think about the company that Jesus had there, something had to happen in their lives. Something was missing in their lives for them to turn to the life on the streets. And if you've ever hit rock bottom or walked through addiction with somebody or seen somebody that's crippled by depression, you know that the party scene can just eat their lunch and leave them wanting more. Jesus came to identify with those who are sick. He reclined in their presence, sending a very loud and clear message to the church folk of the day that these are my people. And I know you're gonna judge me. I know you're gonna think less of me. I know my reputation is gonna suffer because of the relationships that I have. And I think if we want to pattern our lives after Jesus, then we've gotta prepare ourselves for the similar reaction with maybe some of our religious friends. Just being present and being available, being a soft place to land for people that are sick and sore and miserable and hurting. Jesus knew that things would get messy, but they never scared him away. You don't see Jesus here making a sales pitch. You don't see Jesus here trying to get people to come with him to church. You just see Jesus being present and being willing to understand the struggle. And that's because I think he was not just trying to build a name or build a reputation or build a brand. He wasn't offering them a simple little to-do list and system of beliefs and systems of wrong and right, because Christianity is more than a belief system. It's a way of life. And the lifestyle, the posture, the demeanor, the countenance of Christ's followers should be one of empathy, of understanding, of love, an open heart and open arms. As we seek to manage the relationships, as we seek to manage the friendships and the connections that we have in this life, we have to understand that we are God's representatives. And that can feel like a lot of pressure. The Bible says you're his ambassadors, but he also uses a word. He says you're to be my witnesses. Now this is really important because if you go to court as a witness, you're not supposed to sway anybody. You're not supposed to make an argument. You're not supposed to make a defense one way or the other. You just call it like you see it, which is what I love about being a church that's devoted to life change stories, because when you realize our goal as witnesses of Jesus, our goal as ambassadors of Christ is not to win souls. That's the Holy Spirit's job. We're not cut out for it. I mean, just look at how angry we get each other over college football. Like clearly we're not supposed to be the judge and the jury in the case for whose soul gets saved. All we're supposed to do is say, I once was lost, but now I'm found by the grace of God. I'm not what I could be, but I'm not what I used to be. I'm a work in progress. You see, church, when it comes to sharing your faith, God doesn't ask if you're capable. He just asks if you're willing. Willing to maybe let your reputation take a hit because you're willing to associate with people that church folk just view as beneath them. You're maybe willing to do a little bit more than extend an invite card. You're willing to invest in a relationship and get to know somebody. It's not if we're capable, because it's not up to us to save people. It's just if we're willing to share our story. So what I'm not gonna give you today is another cool Christian acronym, some tips on how to share your faith and evangelize the lost. I'm sure you've heard of, there's all kinds of things, the faith outline, the Romans road. Like, these are great tools, great mnemonic devices. What I want to give you today is maybe just a few simple principles that could be integrated in our everyday life that would help us manage our relationships and point the people that we have influence with back to Jesus. And they can be found in some values that we have created here at Mountain Lake. And if you've been through our newcomers dinner, then you would have heard these values, these core principles that we use kind of as navigational beacons to represent Jesus in this world. And the first one I think we could use a little bit more of, it's this idea that smiling is good, but laughter is better. Now, how does that relate to Jesus being in the presence of a lot of lost people? Well, here's what I think the story comes full circle. You got to know that Jesus' disciples at this point, the 12 that he'd recruited, they were rough around the edges. I mean, Matthew's first reaction to becoming a Christ follower was to basically throw a kegger party. Like, not quite what I had in mind, Matthew, but hey, I'll be there. I want to get to know your people. They probably didn't take themselves too seriously at this point. Oftentimes throughout the 4 gospel accounts, Jesus said that Jesus had to rebuke his 12 disciples because their anger would get the best of them. So they had to learn to not take themselves too seriously. And that's the idea of smiling is good, laughter is better. We want to be a church where we can just laugh at ourselves. I'll give you a case in point. We're always in the middle of this tug of war between the story we want versus the story we have. Well, if you saw my wife on social media recently, she posted a picture of my family. We're standing around this Christmas tree that we just cut down at a farm not too far away. And it looked like a really cute moment. My wife and I are there, our newborn baby girl, our 2-year-old son. So our in-laws are there with us. It just looks like this amazing family moment. The sun's setting in the background. But the truth behind that picture is just about as embarrassing as it possibly can be. But hey, smiling good, laughter is better. So here we go. I went to the barn. This is one of the tree farms where you cut the tree down by yourself. I got the saw and I start going at this thing and I get like 20, 30 seconds into it. And it just, the blade just sticks. And I'm like, oh man, okay, maybe I need to try a different angle. So I'm going at this for like 5 minutes at this point, and I can't get more than an inch into this Christmas tree. We found the perfect Christmas tree, but daddy can't saw it down. Sorry, son. I'm a huge disappointment. So sure enough, this strapping young country boy that works there, driving around in his ATV, sees me struggling, and he goes, you want me to help? I'm like, well, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're gonna be able to do this. It's the saw is stuck. It's tough. It's wood. This is nature. It's not me. It's nature. And so he goes, I think I might be able to help. And within like 20 seconds, he slices through the whole thing like the tree's made of butter. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, there we go. Well, thanks for your help. I'm not humiliated. I didn't just lose my man card. And then to make things worse, when I'm helping him move the tree, I get an allergic reaction. I'm wearing long sleeves for a reason, because I've got a rash all up and down my arms, because I'm allergic to everything in God's green earth, apparently. See, smile's good, laughter is better. But there's a reason you enjoy this story so much. It's because you identify more with my failure than my victory. Because that's something we all have in common. And too often we as Christians are too busy trying to show the highlight reel. And I think a lost and hurting world is sitting there wondering, do they even get it? Do they know what I'm going through? And here's the great paradox of the Christian faith, is that at our weakest moment is where we're at our strongest. So one of the New Testament writers, Paul, says we should brag about our weaknesses, because where we're weak is where we tap into God's grace and his strength like we've never seen it before. So we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves, because as we are able to open up the book and share our life change story. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I can see. That's something that our lost and broken and hurting world, the sick, the sore, the miserable, the disreputable sinners, that's something that they can latch on to. That's real life. So we got to start with just owning the good, the bad, and the ugly. And not just trying to have the story we want, but owning the story we've got. And the best way to do that is self-deprecating humor and say, man, I've blown it. I am, Paul would even go so far to say in the book of Romans that he's the chief of sinners and he's writing the Bible. We can be the butt of the joke. We don't have to get the last word in. We don't have to win every debate on Facebook. Smiling is good. Laughter is better. There's another value that I think is very practical and make its way into our everyday life. And that's what we want to do here at Mountain Lake Church is we want to treat everyone like family. We don't want to just shake your hand and help you find a seat. We want to do more than just pour you a cup of coffee. We want to be more than a warm, smiling face. We want to treat everyone like family. And in my house, to the best of my ability, my family gets my best efforts, not my leftovers. We all know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who's just doing the bare minimum. I'll never forget, I had a boss when I worked at Little Caesars as a high schooler who looked at us on a break and said, if I could pay all of you minimum wage, I would. And we're like, that inspires greatness out of us. Way to rally the truth, bro. Like, there's something about being in a relationship with somebody who's just doing the bare minimum that is exhausting, that's tiresome, that's annoying, that's insulting. Let's not be a church that does the bare minimum to show the love of God to our community. Anyone who comes through these doors needs to be treated like family. They deserve our best. Because what you're gonna realize is that nobody here is perfect. Not one person in this room, not one person that ever grabs a microphone and preaches a message or sings a song. You will never meet a perfect person here. But despite our failures, despite our weaknesses, despite the stupid things that we've done, we treat everyone like family. But it takes a little bit of vulnerability. It takes a little bit of transparency to earn the trust, to begin to build bridges with our community. And that's why we love authenticity. Smiling is good, but laughing is better. We like to treat everyone like family, but we love authenticity. Because what we see there in Matthew chapter 9 is that people could be themselves. Not only was Jesus reclining in the presence of these people, but they were reclining with him. They were at ease in the presence of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He could read their journal just by looking into their eyes, knowing a rap sheet of mistakes. But here they were, owning their imperfections. One of my best friends works at a church in South Florida, and their biggest statement, they say, there's no perfect people allowed. Because they love authenticity just as much as we do. And I think it's time that we start showing this Bible Belt community what real Christianity is, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That we are works in progress, that we're not perfect. Look at the person next to you and say, you're not perfect. Look at the next person beside you and say, you're not perfect either. Can't be playing favorites. Now look at the person next to you and say, I'm not perfect. We love authenticity. There's gotta be freedom in just owning that to our community, to one another. Let's just be ourselves. Let's not try to do this fake, plastic Christianity. You know, I think for too long, we've worked so hard to have this moral authority in America that we've lost our influence because we're focusing so hard on being heard that we never stop to listen. And in a country that's splintered and bruised and tattered and more divided than ever before, I think our greatest tool is being understanding, not being understood. I think they will understand our love, not necessarily by the words that we speak, but by the men and women that we're becoming and the lives that we're living. Whether in leadership or at your workplace, I've heard it said that more is caught than taught. And there's something that needs to be caught in this culture, and that's the love of God, not the opinion of Christians. The moments will present themselves to have a conversation about turning from sin and self and turning to Jesus. But may we earn the right to get there by listening, by being fully present, by not trying to win a debate or win an argument or convince anybody. That's not our job. Our job is just to love God and to love people. You know, here in the Bible Belt, we do a really good job talking about Jesus, but we don't always do the best job of living like Jesus. Randy, one of our pastors here, told me the other day that even in a place like Forsyth County where you can throw a rock in any direction and hit a church, get this, if you take a look at every single person living in Forsyth County, however many hundreds of thousands of people that is, and then take a look at every single church here in Forsyth County, and then count all the seats in their auditorium and multiply that by the number of services they have, there are not enough seats for the population, for people to even come and hear a message about Jesus. So what that says to me is it can't just be up to extending an invite card and hoping your preacher can land the plane and make a good gospel presentation. It's got to be something that we take with us to our community. The book of 1 Corinthians talks about the difference between celebrating Jesus and talking about Jesus and the things of Jesus and Christianity versus actually being Jesus. In 1 Corinthians says, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I've got prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all the faith so as to remove mountains but not love, I am nothing. You know, I think we play the part here in the Bible Belt of being the little drummer boy really well. We know how to make a lot of noise. We know how to be a really great clanging cymbal. Here's how it looks. There will be somebody in the lobby after church that asks you to pray for them. And you'll give them the good Christian answer. Oh yeah, brother, I'll pray for you. And then we forget to pray about it. Talk, not action. Faith without works is no faith at all. The book of James teaches us that. I grew up in a town a lot like Forsyth County, lots and lots of churches, but we had street preachers that be speaking on the side of the street, repent, turn or burn. The kingdom of heaven is at hand and you're going to hell. While on the other side of the street was a homeless person begging for a meal. And they would never take the time to walk to McDonald's, get a $4 Happy Meal and meet this need of somebody and earn the right to speak to them about Jesus. Really good, making noise. I can speak in all the languages of the Bible. I can talk about Greek. I can exegete and I can do all these really big seminary words, but I can't buy you a meal. Because what if people see me with a person like that? Look at Facebook. This is God's country. We need to get back to our Christian roots. And this is supposed to be a Christian nation and we're losing. I just want to tell you, whether you won or lost in the election, you are part of the kingdom of heaven before the kingdom of America. Nations rise and fall, but the word of God stands forever. And let me just tell you, a little bit of persecution may be just what the American Christian needs to get out of this convenient Sunday version of Christianity, because every nation in the world that is facing persecution from their government, the church is growing exponentially. Matter of fact, in a communist nation like China, where Christianity is outlawed, the underground church is growing so quickly that it's estimated to become the most Christian nation on the planet within 10 years. We shouldn't be afraid of what does or doesn't happen on Capitol Hill. That's not an argument that God called us to win. Yes, let's vote our principles. Yes, let's stand up for what's right. But let's make sure that if we're going to engage in a conversation behind a screen on a computer, that we can at least get out of the symbol and the noise making of social media and go to a homeless shelter and feed somebody a bowl of soup. We make a lot of noise, but when you look at the population around us, we have barely made a dent. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of bridges to build. We want to be a church that remains committed to never forgetting what it was like to be lost. Jesus said he came not for the healthy, or at least those who think they're healthy, but for the sick who need a healer. May we be a church that seeks to understand the struggles that hurting people face and be willing to put the relationships with hurting people in this community before our reputation as a nice place to attend church on Sunday. Let me tell you, we've seen about 35 students get baptized between middle school and high school this year, and we celebrate that. But to me, there's a moment that happened just recently where we had a mother of some teenagers from some other churches in the area call up one of our moms and say, well, I heard about some of these kids that you guys just baptized, and my daughter saw that person smoking weed on their social media just a few weeks ago. I can't believe you'd baptize somebody like that. And we're like, isn't that like what the good news of Jesus is all about? That nobody's perfect, but it doesn't matter what we've done or haven't done. We can't earn his love. He freely gives it. That's what life change is all about. That's what second chances are all about. That's what baptism is showing, is a new beginning. We will never be the church that would give you a reason to be embarrassed to bring a friend who's far from God through these doors. We will never be a church that believes the gossip, that believes what someone may have said about you on Facebook. We will be a church that assumes the best and believes the best about this family and what we could do for this community. We will never be a church that buys into stereotypes and labels. You see, in the presence of Jesus at that dinner party, race disappeared, class disappeared, status disappeared. No one's excluded from the presence of God. And that's the type of church we want to be. That's the type of people that we want to be. That's the type of relationships that we want to have. We believe that nothing's impossible for you because of what God has done for me. So let me pray for you. And the band's gonna get in place, and we're gonna have just a moment of worship, singing a song about this is my story. What I want this to be is not just another kumbaya moment to finish a worship service, but let it be a time of reflection and be reminded of the relationships that we've got to manage, the people that we've got to be able to point to Jesus. God, I would pray that we would just embrace the truth that our stories matter. That we would see the opportunities that you've created before us. That we could represent you well to people who may believe differently than us. People that may even have hostility toward what we believe, Lord, but they would be able to recline in our presence because your love is so evident. Help us to be people of understanding, that listen well, that love well, and gain the trust to point people to the name where hope is found, Jesus Christ. Would you stand and sing with us?